The envelope should not have been there. Dr. Evelyn Carter noticed it the moment she stepped onto her porch. A stained, crumpled envelope, its edges blackened as if singed, resting against the welcome mat like a dead thing. The paper was damp, reeking of copper and spoiled meat, and smeared with something dark that flaked under her fingertips. Blood. Her breath hitched. She hadn't ordered anything. No one visited her here, not since her mother's funeral. With trembling hands, she peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a child's drawing, crude and feverish. Her house, rendered in shaky crayon, its windows filled with stick figure shadows, their hollow eyes staring outward. At the bottom, in jagged rust-red letters, "We're hungry." Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. The words looked like they'd been written in, "No, don't think it." She crumpled the paper, tossing it onto the hall table. A prank, a sick joke. She was a psychologist, maybe a former patient. Someone unstable had fixated on her. But deep down, she knew. This was no prank. That night, the storm rolled in, rattling the old house's bones. Evelyn sat in her study, reviewing patient files, trying to ignore the way the shadows stretched too long in the lamplight. Then, 3 slow knocks. Boom, boom, boom. She froze. The sound hadn't come from the front door. It came from inside the house. Her skin prickled. The rational part of her whispered, "The wind, a loose shutter." But the air smelled wrong, thick with the scent of wet earth and rotting flowers. She forced herself to the foyer, hand hovering over the deadbolt. Boom, boom, boom. She yanked the door open. A skeletal hand smashed against the glass from the inside, its fingers blackened, peeling, the nails broken down to bloody stubs. Evelyn stumbled back, a scream trapped in her throat. The hand was gone. Only her own wide-eyed reflection stared back. The next morning, Evelyn found Mrs. Driscoll, her elderly neighbor, standing at the property line, clutching her rosary like a shield. "You look just like her," the old woman muttered. "Like who?" Evelyn asked, though she already knew. "Your mother." Mrs. Driscoll's milky eyes darted to the house. "She used to stand at that window, whispering to things I couldn't see." A pause, then softer. "Her sins are waiting for you in there." Evelyn's stomach turned. What sins? But Mrs. Driscoll just crossed herself and shuffled away, leaving Evelyn with the unshakable certainty that something had been watching them from the upstairs window. That night, as Evelyn lay in bed, she heard it again, a whisper from the closet. "Let us in." And this time, it sounded like her mother's voice. The discovery of the child-sized graves, Mrs. Driscoll's gruesome death, Daniel's arrival, and his first lie. The smell hit her first. Evelyn woke to the thick, cloying stench of spoiled meat and formaldehyde, the same odor that had clung to her mother's funeral parlor all those years ago. Her stomach lurched. The house was too quiet. No creaking floorboards, no distant knocks. just the slow, rhythmic drip of liquid coming from downstairs. Something's wrong. She followed the sound to her study, the wooden stairs groaning under her bare feet. The door was slightly ajar, though she always kept it closed. A sliver of darkness pulsed beyond it, as if the room itself was breathing. Then she saw the corpse. Mrs. Driscoll sat upright in Evelyn's therapy chair, her blue-tinged hands folded neatly in her lap, her clouded eyes wide and unblinking. Her lips had been crudely sewn into a smile, the black thread pulling her cheeks into a grotesque rictus. A single drop of dark fluid slid from the corner of her stitched mouth and splattered onto the rug. Drip, drip, drip. Evelyn's breath came in shallow gasps. She stumbled back, her shoulder hitting the doorframe, and the corpse's head twitched toward her. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Evelyn stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, watching as the two officers stepped right past the body. "You said you found her where?" the taller cop asked, flipping through his notepad. "There," Evelyn said, pointing to the chair. "She's right there." The officers exchanged glances. The study was empty. No corpse, no blood, just Evelyn's chair, slightly askew, as if someone had recently stood up from it. "Ma'am," the younger cop said gently, "when was the last time you slept?" Evelyn's hands trembled. They couldn't see it. The older cop sighed. "Grief does funny things to the mind. You lost your mother recently, didn't you?" Evelyn wanted to scream. Mrs. Driscoll's corpse was still there, still grinning at her, but the cops acted like she was hallucinating. Then the taller cop's radio crackled. A call had just come in. An elderly woman matching Mrs. Driscoll's description had been found dead in her home. "Possible suicide," the dispatcher said. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Because if Mrs. Driscoll was dead in her own house, then what was sitting in Evelyn's chair? After the police left, Evelyn locked herself in the bathroom, splashing icy water on her face. She gripped the edges of the sink, staring into the mirror. Her reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed. Then it blinked. Evelyn didn't. She recoiled. The reflection's lips twitched just slightly before settling back into place. She raised a hand. The reflection hesitated, then copied her a second too late. A whimper escaped Evelyn's throat. She slammed her palm against the glass, shattering it. Shards bit into her skin, blood dripping into the sink like the fluid from Mrs. Driscoll's lips. From the broken mirror, a dozen fractured reflections watched her. None of them moved in sync. Then. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat awake, watching the shadows in the hallway and listening to the sound of something crawling up the stairs. Then Daniel arrives, but his eyes are wrong. The first child's grave is uncovered. A whisper from the walls, "You're next." Evelyn pressed her palms against her ears, but the sound pulsed through her skull. 3 heavy beats, then silence, then 3 again. Boom, boom, boom. It had been hours since the police left, hours since the thing in the mirror had blinked at her. Now the house itself seemed to be breathing, the walls expanding and contracting like a living thing. Then, a voice. "Evelyn?" She nearly screamed. The front door creaked open, and there he was, Daniel Carter, her older brother, his dark hair damp from the rain, his leather jacket smelling of old cigarettes and motor oil, the same way he'd smelled when they were kids. Her throat tightened. "What are you doing here?" Daniel frowned. "You called me." She hadn't. Evelyn's hands shook as she poured coffee she didn't remember making. The liquid was too dark, thick like blood, but Daniel drank it without hesitation. "You look like hell," he said. "You feel like hell after a corpse shows up in your house and vanishes," she snapped. Daniel's cup froze halfway to his lips. "What?" Evelyn told him everything. The envelope, the knocks, Mrs. Driscoll's stitched smile. Daniel listened, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed. "Ev, come on, you've been under a lot of stress. Mom's death, the house. It's not in my head." She slammed her fist on the table. The coffee rippled, the surface reflecting something that wasn't either of them. Daniel stood abruptly. "I'm not doing this. If you're going to spiral, do it alone." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Evelyn rushed to the window, watching as Daniel stalked down the driveway, his shoulders tense. Then he stopped. His body jerked, limbs locking, and then, horrifyingly, he began to walk backwards, not turning around. His body moved in reverse, feet dragging unnaturally, his head lolling like a broken doll's. Boom, boom. The knocks echoed again, this time from inside the walls. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she pulled up her gallery. Maybe she could take a video, prove what was happening. And then she saw it. A new photo, dated yesterday. In it, Evelyn stood in her kitchen unaware, and behind her, looming over her shoulder, was Daniel, his eyes pitch black, his smile stretching too wide. The caption beneath the photo read, "He's already here." Evelyn's phone buzzed, a new text from her own number. "Don't trust him. He's one of them." The discovery of the child-sized graves, Daniel's memories that don't match reality, the first time Evelyn sees herself in the house, but it's not her. The storm had returned. Rain lashed against the windows like fingernails scraping glass, and the wind howled through the eaves of the old house. Evelyn sat curled on the couch. Daniel's unnerving backward walk still burned into her mind. Her phone clutched in her hand, the text from herself glaring up at her. "Don't trust him. He's one of them." A sharp knock at the door. Not the slow, rhythmic pounding from before. This was desperate, human. Evelyn crept forward, peering through the peephole. Lena Choi stood on the porch. Her former patient. Her dead former patient. Lena's dark hair clung to her face in wet strands, her hospital gown soaked through, her skin gray and bloated, as if she had been submerged for weeks. Her lips were tinged blue, her fingers wrinkled from prolonged exposure to water. She drowned herself a month ago." "Evelyn," Lena rasped, her voice bubbling like waterlogged lungs. "Please, let me in." Evelyn's breath hitched. This wasn't possible. A hallucination, a nightmare. But the smell was real. The stench of river water and decay, thick enough to coat Evelyn's tongue. Lena pressed a hand against the door, her nails cracked and blackened. "You promised to help me." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the lock. Lena's eyes, milky, lifeless, locked onto hers. Then, slowly, her jaw began to unhinge. Her mouth stretched wider, wider, until her face split like rotted fruit, and a swarm of flies erupted from her throat, buzzing in a thick, writhing cloud. Evelyn screamed, stumbling back as Lena's body collapsed inward, her limbs dissolving into a puddle of black water that seeped under the door. Evelyn scrambled away, her back hitting the stairs. The water slithered across the floorboards, forming skeletal fingers that reached for her. One icy hand grabbed her wrist. Evelyn shrieked, yanking free, but the damage was done. 5 black fingerprints encircled her wrist. The skin beneath blistered and peeling, as if burned by something far colder than fire. She scrubbed at the marks, but they wouldn't fade. They itched. And beneath her skin, something writhed. Evelyn needed answers. The basement had always been her mother's domain. A locked room at the bottom of the stairs, one Evelyn had been forbidden from entering as a child. The key was still where her mother had always kept it, taped beneath the 3rd step. The door groaned open, revealing a cavern of shadows. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something sweetly rotten. Evelyn flicked on the light. The basement was a makeshift morgue. Small wooden coffins lined the walls, each no longer than a child's body. Dust-coated jars filled with preserved organs sat on rusted metal shelves, and in the center of the room, the dirt was disturbed, as if something had clawed its way out. A crude headstone stood at its head, the name carved in jagged letters. Evelyn. Her breath left her in a rush, because the date etched beneath her name wasn't some far-off future. It was yesterday's date. Evelyn didn't hear Daniel approach. She only felt his breath on her neck as he whispered, "You weren't supposed to see that." The first flashback to Evelyn's childhood illness, a ritual blade hidden beneath the floorboards. The basement's air clung to Evelyn's skin like a second layer of sweat, thick with the scent of wet soil and old blood. She barely registered Daniel's presence behind her. Her entire focus was on the small wooden box sitting atop one of the child-sized coffins. Inside, a cassette tape. Labeled in her mother's neat, looping script, Evelyn, age 7. Her fingers trembled as she slotted it into the old recorder on the shelf. Static hissed, then her mother's voice. Not the warm, comforting tone Evelyn remembered. This voice was guttural, chanting in a language that made Evelyn's teeth ache. Beneath it, the sound of a child screaming. Her? Daniel? The recording dissolved into wet, choking sobs, then a final, whispered plea. "Take me instead." The tape clicked off. Evelyn's breath came in jagged gasps. She remembered being sick as a child, a fever that nearly killed her. And then she got better, but at what cost? The walls shuddered. At first, Evelyn thought it was the storm, until the peeling wallpaper bubbled, the plaster beneath splitting like flesh under a scalpel. The wall peeled back, revealing a glistening, meaty tunnel, its walls pulsing with veins, its depths exhaling a breath that smelled of open graves and burning hair. Something moved inside. A pale, emaciated figure, its limbs too long, its joints bending in impossible directions as it crawled toward her. Its head snapped up. Daniel's face. But wrong. Rotting. Evelyn stumbled back, and the wall sealed shut, leaving only unbroken plaster behind. A sharp sting in her neck. Evelyn barely registered the needle before the world tilted, her limbs turning to lead. Daniel caught her as she collapsed, his grip too strong, too cold. "Shh," he murmured, "it's almost time." Darkness swallowed her. When she woke, her head pounded, her vision swimming. She was tied to a chair, the basement's ritual candles casting flickering shadows. And in the center of the room, her mother, or what was left of her. The corpse sat upright in a yellowed wedding dress, its skeletal hands folded in its lap. Its lips had been sewn shut, the same black thread from Mrs. Driscoll's smile cutting into withered flesh. Daniel knelt beside it, stroking its hair with reverent, trembling fingers. "She's almost ready," he whispered. Then he turned to Evelyn, his eyes black from corner to corner. "And so are you." And the corpse. As Evelyn struggled against her bonds, the corpse's eyes snapped open. The truth about Evelyn's death. The cult's final ritual begins. A choice: become the next sacrifice or the next monster. The corpse's eyes weren't just open, they were Evelyn's. Her mother's skeletal face stared back at her with her own irises, glassy and unblinking. The stitches on its lips strained as the jaw worked, a wet, clicking sound emerging from its throat. Then, Daniel's hands clamped over her shoulders from behind, his breath icy against her ear. "You still don't remember, do you?" Evelyn thrashed, but the ropes held fast. The basement walls pulsed around her, the candlelight stretching shadows into impossible shapes. Daniel circled her, his smile widening until the corners of his mouth split with a sound like tearing paper. "You die every night, Evelyn." He pressed a finger to her temple. "And every morning you wake up forgetting." The floor lurched. Evelyn's chair toppled. The ropes suddenly rotted through, crumbling to dust. She scrambled back as the walls bent inward, the ceiling dropping like a jaw. The house was alive and hungry. Doors appeared where there were none, hallways twisting into spirals, stairs leading upside down into black voids. Evelyn ran, but every turn brought her back to the basement, a dozen basements, each with a different Evelyn trapped inside. Some screamed, some begged, some had no mouths left to scream with. Daniel's voice echoed from everywhere at once. "How many times have you done this, Evelyn? How many times have you failed?" Evelyn's hand closed around cold metal, a ritual knife half buried in the dirt. Daniel materialized in front of her, his arms spread. "You know how this ends." She plunged the blade into his chest. Black blood bubbled up, then defied gravity, streaming upward in thick ropes, coiling along the ceiling like veins. Daniel laughed, the sound splintering into a chorus of voices, her mother's, Mrs. Driscoll's, Lena's. His body collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, but his grin remained, hovering in the air long after his flesh had dissolved into smoke. Then, as the house reassembled itself around her, Evelyn realized there was one way out, and it was under her mother's wedding dress. The corpse's mouth unstitches. What's inside? Evelyn's final sacrifice. The last knock from the outside. White light. The sharp sting of antiseptic. A steady, rhythmic beep, beep, beep. Evelyn's eyelids fluttered open. A hospital room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sterile brightness over pale blue walls. Her body ached, her muscles weak, as if she'd been lying here for years. A nurse, soft-eyed, gentle-handed, adjusted the IV in her arm. "Welcome back, Evelyn." Evelyn's throat was raw. How long?" The nurse smiled. "You've been catatonic since your mother's suicide. 10 years. 10 years." Evelyn's breath hitched. The house, the knocks, the corpses, all a hallucination? The nurse squeezed her hand. "You're safe now." Disclaimer: all this content is material borrowed from the internet. If there is any material that infringes on copyright, please contact us at help.nocopyright@gmail.com and we will take it down. Something was wrong. The hospital room was too quiet. No distant voices, no intercom announcements. Just the beeping. And the beeping, it wasn't a heart monitor. It was 3 slow, repeating tones. Boom, boom, boom. Evelyn's pulse spiked. She yanked the IV from her arm. The needle wasn't attached to a tube. It was a rusty nail embedded in her vein. The nurse turned, still smiling. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" The nurse's face rippled. Her skin sloughed off like wet paper, her features dissolving into something glistening and raw. Then, Daniel's grin stretched wide beneath the melting flesh. "You never left, Evelyn." The hospital walls crumbled, the ceiling peeling away like burnt film. And Evelyn screamed. because she wasn't in a hospital. She wasn't even in the house. She was inside a dollhouse, a perfect tiny replica of her mother's home, its walls no taller than her forearm. And beyond it, a vast dark room, its ceiling lost in shadow. A gigantic, rotting hand reached down, its fingers blackened and peeling, each nail cracked and bleeding. It wrapped around the dollhouse and squeezed. Wood splintered, plaster cracked. Evelyn felt it all, and as the darkness swallowed her, she heard it one last time. 3 knocks. But this time, they came from outside the dollhouse. Somewhere in a long abandoned attic, a dollhouse sits silent until boom, boom, boom. The horror was never escapable. Time loop dollhouse. Daniel and the mother were never real, just manifestations of the curse. The house wins. Evelyn is trapped forever.